Back again, and I've got another gentleman who's got some very, very interesting to talk to us about, and his name is Michael. No, I'm sorry, Robert Ronson. Robert, I'm sorry.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Sometimes I'll go crazy. So good to have you here.
Well, thank you.
And I know that you're an author, and you've written something that is totally different from anything I've thought about.
Well, yeah, controversial issues in politics and greed dominate our society with power struggles for change. My book tries to show how past mistakes led up to how our system's working now, but also discusses what I think are most enjoyable films that entertain the average person with temporary escapism.
Wow.
And when you talk about movies made in sound, you have to talk about presidents of the United States, because presidents influence the kind of movies that come out to the box office.
Never thought of that.
Yeah, and the first sound-talking movie made in 1927 was Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer under President Calvin Coolidge. And back then, they had to compete with, silent films going against sound films. And then the next president that came along was Herbert Hoover. And under Hoover, the only thing that happened was that the Marx Brothers became famous, and sound movies were starting to take over the silent films. But the next president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president more times than any president we've ever had. And in his fourth term, even though he died in less than 3 months, most of the movies that came out under Roosevelt had to do with World War II.
I was going to say that.
And I go through the rest of the presidents all the way through Donald Trump. So if you're interested in that type of thing, that's in my book. But you can go down to the store and you can find a good critic that writes a book that's going to tell you what's good and bad about the film. But there's only one book in the United States, my book, that's not only going to tell you what's good and bad about the film, it's going to tell you how many times you can watch that movie in your lifetime. That's right, I've got 6 categories, and the first 2 are categories of motion pictures you don't get tired of. The third category you could watch up to 3 more times, the fourth category up to 2 more times, and the fifth and sixth category you don't want to watch at all. But if you want an example, I'll give you one example of a movie you don't get tired of. Okay. The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yes.
Now, I've got 590 of them in here. So if you're interested, you could always find this book on Amazon, and you can order it in Barnes & Noble. And my name is Robert D. Ronson. And I put the middle initial in there because there are some people with my last name I don't want to get mixed up with.
I want to tell us more about this book. How did you start feeling about writing something like
Well,
this?
I'm a retired teacher, and I retired in 2006 of July 1st. And I got to thinking, I have a lot of grandkids, and I have 4 daughters, and I thought, what am I going to do? I'm bothered by everyone coming over and everything. And I thought maybe I'll just write something. And I always knew quite a lot about motion pictures. So when I corrected a few mistakes that the media had out, I decided I'm going to write a book on movies. And at the same time, I wanted to talk a little bit about our political system, but I don't take sides. I just want you to know how things are going. But in the meantime, there's so many movies you can watch that give you escapism where you don't have to think about that. I mean, it's temporary, but it still makes you feel better. So I decided I'm going to write a book that has to do with the movies. And when I was a kid and I was in high school, I had a hobby of making home movies in sound.
No kidding.
No. I made movies that you wouldn't believe of. When the Twilight Zone came out, I made one called The Toilet Zone. Those who leave it alone remain dry, but those who tangle with it will become wet. And in the movie, Joe Hardy gets flushed at the end. But there were other movies I made. Where There's a Will, There Are Relatives. And then I made one called It's Gravely Possible. And that was Dr. Via Media receiving a candidate for surgery in a secluded lab where they are involved in an attempt to manufacture a human being. A monster movie, you might say.
Yes, I would say.
And so I did all types of things, and I learned that when you have students come to be in the film, you have to prepare for the worst. They may not come back, so how are you going to write the film? Or they have to wear the same type of clothing because they're in the middle of a scene, and learning how to do special effects, trick photography, which, of course, if you were up on the house, I don't think anyone should try this. You put mattress down below and jump off. If you take the film, cut it, and turn it around, it'll go the opposite way where you jump up on top of the house. So I learned a lot of things with the kids and just working with my, just being in high school and having this kind of a hobby was great. And I even have a class reunion coming up next month. So.
Oh, good.
But that kind of gives you an idea of a little bit of my past. But I always knew quite a lot about motion pictures because I saw all of them. And every movie in this book, and this is a paperback, and this is a hardback, every movie in the book I've seen. And I've seen 3 times more than this amount of movies. But if you're interested in movies that I think the majority of the people like, because some of the movies that come out, when they select them as Best Picture, it's not always what people want to see. How did it become Best Picture? Maybe it was in a category where it did really well, and they might have had a lot of production values. Because if you think about it, if you look at movies today, there's a number of films that come out at the last part of the year, November, December, and those movies make Best Picture. Well, what about some of the other ones that were there that didn't get chosen?
I know.
And so my book deals with things like this, too.
Oh, it does, because I think I'm interested in that end of it, too.
And I just love talking about movies. And
okay, what's your favorite?
My favorite movie is a movie they don't really have anymore.
Oh, no.
Let me tell you. Wait till I tell you this. It's called It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. The movie came out in Cinerama. It was 3 hours and 16 minutes long. Guess what? They released it to theater, the regular movie theaters, cut it down to 2 hours and 34 minutes, and lost the footage.
Good
So
Lord.
now what they're trying to do is put the footage back into the movie they'd lost. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the real new, updated version. But from what I understand, it went from 2 hours and 34 minutes up to 2 hours and 55 minutes, and now another one I think is coming out that's like 2 hours and 5 minutes, 3 hours and 5 minutes.
3 hours.
But that is the movie I like the best, and probably most critics didn't. But
wow.
That's one that was my favorite. The second one was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, made in 1956, with Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter. Now, someone said, how could you put that down as your second best? Well, if you remember, Stephen King said it was the best movie ever made. So, the way I look at it, if people see that movie, even though it's old, made in the 50s, you look under the bed at night before you go to bed.
Oh, you scary one.
and another thing that's interesting is back in the 1950s, the 3D is not like it used to be. Back in the 1950s, they made a movie with Vincent Price called The House of Wax.
Oh, I saw that.
And that's been out. But if you remember, they used to have red and green glasses.
Yes.
And when you watch the movie, it puts you in the film. Like when he was chasing her through the gaslight streets in London, you were there standing on the street.
I know.
And the thing that scared the heck out of me, there's a person in back of me that collapsed and fell over, and they had to take him out on a stretcher. And then I heard that people were getting heart attacks, and their eyes were getting blurry and everything from watching 3D. So they came out and decided to change it and put the CinemaScope movies out to place the old 3D. But if you saw the original 3D, it's kind of like the comic books that came out. It came right out at you.
I know.
And I used to love that. And of course, you still see that movie, I said, The House of Wax, on television today. It's in color, And it doesn't have that same effect because when you see the paddleboard coming out at your face, it doesn't do what it did with the glasses.
I know, there's nothing like it. It didn't get as popular as you would think it would.
Right. Well, back then it probably was popular because from what I understand, Vincent Price had to wear that makeup for over 24 hours. And the movie was good. I thought it was good. And that's why I always took an interest in motion pictures. And I don't forget what I see.
I was in one, but he never completed it. He did the whole thing, and then he never did anything with it. So, and it was only 5 people in it. I got a good part.
What was the name of the movie? Do you remember?
Oh gosh!
Or they didn't give it a title?
They gave it a title. I just something about you being responsible for people with you, but it was about a couple of young men that go camping, and one of them dies, and it was an interesting little thing, you know. I don't know why I never finished it.
Well, that's one thing that I always cared about is motion pictures. So if you ever get bored, you get tired, you want to do something, go out to the theater, watch a movie.
Right, that's right.
Watch when you want.
Glad you came in to talk about it because I love the movies, and my favorites were I Wake Up Crying or something like that with Betty Grable. Victor Mature, and I've watched that years after years after years. They're very old, but now I like Dirty Dancing because of Swayze's dancing. Oh my gosh, that guy! He could dance.
I love the old movies. I love them.
I do too.
Turner Classic Movies is the best place to watch them.
Yes, that's where I am all the time. So come in again, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I will.
And I really enjoyed having you here today.
I enjoyed being here.
Okay, hon. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.